All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our first Avid audio community plugin of the year. Although it's February, we've been quite busy. We missed everybody. I hope you're all doing well. So welcome back. Happy New Year. I know it's a little late for Happy New Year, but Happy New Year anyway. My name is Greg Strikechin. I'm the audio evangelist for Avid, and it is really great to be back on behalf of myself and the entire team, Claire and the product specialist team, the pre-sales team from Gil, Dave, Dan, and the rest of the team globally. Welcome to everyone. So we've got a really special community plugin today. It is with great pleasure that we kicked off the year, kicked off this first one with some very special guests. So we'll jump into that in just a second. But again, welcome to everyone. Hope everyone's been staying safe and keeping well. We're going to continue our series throughout the year. Hopefully we'll be able to be together again, live and in person at some point. But even then, we're going to continue this engagement because so many of you, thank you so much for all of the messages we've been getting. We're so glad that you're finding this valuable and that this is meaningful to you. So we're going to get right into it. Today, we've got some special guests. We're going to be joined by some of the crew from Noise Engineering, really amazing LA-based, Los Angeles-based Eurorack company that have made some really incredible plugins. They launched last month during our NAMM, the NAMM Believe in Music, and we'll get into that in just a second. And we're also going to be joined by our good friend, really amazing producer, artist, Matt Lange. So Matt has been, a really great friend of Avid's for years, and we're so incredibly lucky and blessed to have him here as well, showing off these really amazing plugins from Noise Engineering. So let's jump right into it. So I am so incredibly excited. I'll give a little bit of background. We have some really great guests here. So I'm going to ask Chris Kaiser, Marcus Cancia, and Matt Lange to join us on screen here. Chris and Marcus are joining us from Noise Engineering, again, in Los Angeles. And Matt is based in Los Angeles as well. So we've got the LA crew here today. Hi, everybody. How are you guys all doing?
Hey, Greg.
Good.
Good.
It's early.
Yeah, it is early. So thank you for joining us so early. Really appreciate it. Chris, you act like it's early, but you are a nonstop work machine at all hours, and so I know this isn't that crazy for you, but thank you nonetheless. So little backstory. So obviously, we're going to talk about the new plugins that you guys launched last month. We launched it January 21st, if my dates are correct. And Marcus, you'll kind of explain. You'll go through the plugins here in just a minute. But quick little backstory. I met Matt several years ago. We started, working on some stuff for Avid. Matt has been a really huge proponent of Pro Tools and working in Pro Tools top to bottom, and we're very thankful for that. Matt has been constantly featured on our main stage for NAMM, and Matt and I have become good friends over the years. And a couple of years ago, if you don't already know, Matt is a pretty big modular synthesis guy amongst all of his other talents, his musical talents, being a guitarist, vocalist, great musician, just in period. He's a big modular synthesis guy. I've been a big synthesizer dude my entire life, pretty much. Modular synthesis is not something I'd ever really played with, but was very interested in. And one NAMM a few years ago, Matt said, yeah, it's time. So we took a break after one of our main stage sessions, and Matt walked me down over to the modular section of NAMM. And the first people I ever met was actually Chris and Steven from Noise Engineering. The first module I ever got to hear, which ended up being the first module I ever bought, is a module called Laquelic Iteritas, which is still a big part of my voices when I'm using my kit. And I fell in love with modular synthesis, and it's pretty sad because my wife hates that I'm spending so much money on it. But we've become really good friends with the Noise Engineering crew. Matt is good friends with them, and we have enjoyed each other's company over the years. And fast forward, Chris, Marcus, you guys have now created this first set of plugins, which are currently exclusive to Pro Tools in AAX format right now. AU and VST will come at some point, but we're very thankful and grateful to you guys. So Let me just start by, again, welcoming you guys, and then I'll just ask, why plugins? You guys are so beloved and so famous in the Eurorack arena. What made you decide to do plugins?
Plugins had been on the agenda for a really long time. We wanted to do them. We want to do a lot more plugins. It's something that people have been asking us about. We really have customers in a lot of different genres and different ways of performing. So, we work with composers, for example. If you're a composer, you're on a really tight timeline. You often need to be able to recall things really quickly. So you can just change something, tweak something a little bit. And if you've ever used Eurorack, that's not really a thing in Eurorack. Recall in Eurorack is decidedly lacking. So plugins offer that. And so that was one of the things. We've also had people that, are in places where Eurorack is really difficult to come by. Mm-hmm. And so people have been just asking us. And then the last thing is the portability. We understand how hard it is to travel with a giant case of modules that you then have to repatch, and again, that recallability, when you can also just travel with a laptop if you're trying to perform, when performing live was the thing. So, we've had a lot of our customers just say, I really, really would love to be able to use this with my laptop. And make it just a more lightweight thing. So it's something that we've been wanting to do for a long time. It's been years in the making.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's been so interesting being able to play with them, coming from knowing all of your stuff on the Eurorack side, which leads me to my next question, which is, inevitably when you create a plugin that's based on something that already exists in the real world. So these plugins are based on actual modules that exist. So, which, I know Marcus will get into in a minute. What can folks expect? I mean, obviously, you've got some differentiation. You just named a good amount of that as far as the availability of the plugins and what they offer. But are the engines, if you're using Basimila Satiritas as a plugin, are you getting the same engine, the same guts and the same grit that you're able to get in the module?
Absolutely. So all of our oscillators are, so what is the core of the virtual instruments, all of our oscillators in Eurorack are digital. So it's a pretty, well, I don't want to say trivial, but because I'm not the software engineer, so I'll just throw Stephen under the bus and say it's trivial to port it to software because it's already software. Okay. So what's really different here is the wrapper, right? So whether you're putting it into a piece of hardware or whether you're putting it into an AAX plugin is really, it's not trivial, let's be honest, but it is strictly the wrapper that you're putting it in. There are some differences, of course. So, now you have polyphony. You can have multiple instances of your Basimila Satiritas where you can do that in hardware, but then you have to buy multiple instances. Yeah, it's a little bit more cost prohibitive to do that. I'm happy to sell you that many, however many Basimilas you want, I'm happy to sell you. But it's a bit cost prohibitive for most people to do that. So, that's definitely something that is a difference there. And then polyphony in Eurorack. Typically you have, and all of our oscillators currently are monophonic, but now we have polyphony built into these. So that's another huge difference with the plugins that you just don't see in Eurorack. But otherwise, underlying guts are the same.
The same. Awesome. I think that's a really important thing to kind of point out and talk about, because again, inevitably folks always ask, well, if this is based on that, what does that really mean? So that's perfect answer. So for those who may not be familiar with noise engineering, two questions. So the first one is, how would you define the noise engineering, ethos and sound? What sets you apart from everyone else? And I wouldn't say maybe it is becoming a very crowded Eurorack space, but what sets noise engineering apart?
So in Eurorack, one of the things that really matters is space, right? So people have a limited amount of space in a case, which is different than the plugin world. One of the things that we really strive for in Eurorack is to fit as much functionality as we can in a limited footprint. How that translates to the plugin world is, and Marcus, maybe you can talk a little bit about this since you're going to be covering the plugins themselves, but how that translates to plugins is that we're still trying to pack in a lot of functionality without it being, well, let me back up a little bit. We try to pack a lot of features into a small footprint, but without it being menu divey, without it being something where you have to memorize 30 different combinations. It's just, we like to have products that are extremely immediate and fun to use.
Yeah.
So how that translates to our plugins is that we like to pack a lot of stuff in there, but we don't want it to be terribly difficult to use. We want you to be able to open it up and get fun sounds out of it. Marcus, would you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I mean, one thing you'll notice on these plugins is compared to a lot of other synthesizers, there are not very many parameters. And that is for a reason. As Chris said, in Eurorack, you're very limited with space, and that means that there's just a maximum number of knobs we can actually fit into a module. So when we ported these to the plugins, we kept those same number of parameters. And since they're coming from hardware, all of the parameters are very refined. They're very much designed so that when you move something, when you change a setting, you are still going to hit a sweet spot. You're not going to have to struggle to find a really good sound. So what you'll notice as you start to use these plugins is there's not a lot of parameters, but as you're moving things, you're going to be finding a lot of sounds that hopefully you really like.
Awesome. Awesome. So I think, well, actually one more thing, and then we can jump into the actual plugins. So Chris, how did the company start to begin with?
It started as a dare.
How all great companies start.
My husband, Steven, is the person that actually started the company. One of his friends picked up a bunch of modules, and Steven, being Steven, and an engineer, was a little cranky and started critiquing each module. And finally, his friend said, well, if you're so smart, then go make me a module. And that became the first product we ever made. Within a few years, we both decided we were unhappy with what we were doing. We were in completely different careers. Steven was in game audio. I was a biology professor. We did completely different things. We decided we didn't really want to do what we were doing anymore. We barely saw each other, and we figured we could make a go of this. So we quit our jobs, bought a house, moved in, and decided to do this full time. And we've been doing this ever since.
And we're so happy for that. So awesome. So I figure, why don't we get into a little bit of the plugins? Marcus, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again, and then you just nudge me when it's time to go to the next one. And so, yeah, Marcus is going to give us a little quick rundown of the three plugins that are currently available. Let me go ahead and share my screen here, and here we go. All right, Marcus.
Yeah. So just quick overview. We have three plugins we'll be talking about today. The Basimilus Iteritas, it's based off of our Basimilus Iteritas Alter Eurorack module. The Cursus Varior, which is based on the Cursus Iteritas oscillator and the dynamic section from the Ampliversio, and the Desmodus, which is based on our Desmodus Versio reverb. So first and foremost, these plugins are designed to be fun. We want you to enjoy playing with sound and enjoy playing with these plugins. They come with a huge number of presets. Basimilus Iteritas and Cursus Varior each have over 1,000 presets each, and Desmodus comes with over 500. As we mentioned earlier, all the parameters on these are really straightforward to use, and they're designed to be automated. So since these are just inspired by modular, in modular, you tend to use control voltage to move all your parameters around. And that means that when we brought these Pro Tools, we wanted to have that same experience just with automation instead of voltage. So jumping into Basimilus, first and foremost, Basimilus ateritas is a percussion synthesizer, although it can do a lot more than just percussion. I don't want to brag here, but it sounds really cool. As a module, it's been a staple in all of our systems for a really long time, and we're really excited that now you get to experience it as a plugin. It's a 6-operator additive FM synthesizer, and while that may sound kind of complicated, the controls are really straightforward to use, so you can easily create your sounds without worrying about what's happening under the hood. Basimilus ateritas is really great for anything with synthetic percussion, but again, it can do a lot more than just your standard drums. It's also fantastic for subs and basses, or even higher frequency sounds like plucks. I even used it to emulate like insects and footsteps when I was working on a project where I really needed some unique sound effects. So moving on to the next one is Cursus Varior. It's a great melodic synth that's really perfect for pads and leads and basses. It creates sound with a dynamically generated wavetable that you can then shape and change with the dynamic section and the wave folder and oversampling controls. One of my favorite techniques with the Cursus is to kind of create a nice kind of mellow sound and then turn that into something really harsh and aggressive with the wave folder. It really only takes tweaking one control to completely transform a sound. And you'll really hear that in Matt's demo, how you can completely change something just by moving a couple of parameters. So the parameters on Cursus, as you can see, are kind of unusual. They give you complete harmonic control over the sound and waveforms that you generate. While that's a bit unfamiliar if you're used to more traditional synthesizers, the dynamic section features a straightforward ADSR envelope that can also control a filter with some pretty awesome resonance control. So you can do some more traditional harmonic and dynamic shaping as well. And I really think that Cursus Varior would pretty much fit into anything you're working on, whether you need a melody line or a bass or something completely abstract and different. And then the last plugin is the Desmodus. So Desmodus is our reverb, and you may think of reverb as more of a tool for emulating different spaces in a mix, but we really wanted Desmodus to be a lot more than that. So it's a sound design tool, first and foremost. It's not just a room emulator. There are 3 reverb algorithms. So there's a clean reverb, distorted reverb, and a pitch shifting shimmer. And one of the things that makes Desmodus really unique is the feedback parameter called regen. So 100% feedback is actually halfway through that parameter. And as you go past that halfway point, you get into infinite reverbs. And if you crank it up all the way, it starts to actually duck based on the input signals. So you get kind of sidechain type effects that can really add some awesome movement to your atmospheres. And there's different automation modes. So again, this is based on a Eurorack module. So it's designed really to be played like an instrument and be its own voice and project and not just be, a space tool. So if you want reverb that's really more than your standard halls rooms, Desmodus is definitely for you. Okay, so I've talked about these a lot. You definitely want to hear those. So I think Matt has a demo for us. So let's definitely get into that.
All right. So yeah, thank you, Marcus. So yeah, Marcus, Chris, we'll bring you back at the end for Q&A. And I think at this point, we're going to invite Matt Lange to come and do his thing. Hey, Matt.
Hello, everybody. So let me share my screen. Okay. So I put this little demo together, and it's made pretty much exclusively just with the brand new noise engineering plugins. I'm going to play it. As you can see, there's a ton of modulation in here, and that's because that's what really makes these come alive in general, much like their modular hardware counterparts. So I'm just going to hit play, and then we'll talk about what I did within this. little demo of this stuff. And the first thing that I wanted to take advantage of is, like Chris mentioned earlier, polyphony is something that basically doesn't exist within modular or Eurorack in particular. And this is an opportunity because I love the sound of Noise Engineering's work. I always have. That's what attracted me to their hardware. And that's also the fact that I can have that kind of sound, which is very unique within a plugin atmosphere, which actually gives me a lot more flexibility than I'd have traditionally with modular. That's exciting to me. So the way this thing starts is with the cursus barrier. And because there's no way traditionally, like with a modular, could I just go and, play that? I just can't do it. It's not physically possible. So I wanted to basically showcase the fact that polyphony is a real thing, which seems trivial usually with plugins, but for us, it's not. So it's the CV, and I wanted to bring it to life a little bit. So I'm modulating a few things, such as the parity, which that's how it changes the waveform itself. And then also tilt gets modulated as this thing kind of evolves. And I wanted this to be kind of like an evocative, almost like Blade Runner-esque kind of thing. So what I've always loved about noise engineering is the way you can change all the sounds. So if I'll hold a chord. And it's all these ways you can basically subtly affect the tone of a pad, which I find really inspiring in general because I like subtle shifts. I don't like things when, it's fun to have really extreme shifts sometimes, but especially with a pad, which I want to be more evocative, this is where something like this really comes in handy. So I'm using the cursus like that. It's going through a couple eventide harmonizers just to chorus it a bit out for no reason other than I like them. But it also goes through the Desmodus, and the Desmodus, like both Chris and Marcus mentioned, it's kind of like this insane reverb pad maker thing. And I actually didn't know until just now that 50% regeneration is 100%, or that's when it starts to basically self-oscillate. Because that's why I have to keep hitting return to go back, because if I don't, this thing's going to be ringing out the entire time. But I love how, for instance, let's just move to a section over here where the density's up and the regen is up. Again, I can just play that chord, and it becomes this pad. I'm not even touching the keyboard anymore, which is good. And I had the node mode. Chris and Steven and Marcus can better explain what that is, but I have it in shift, which is basically doing an octave shift, like shimmer style reverb. So that's something that's always really beautiful sounding on pads. And the Desmodus, I also automate a lot throughout this entire piece, especially with all the instruments. I use it for transitions where I just want the feedback to something build up. And it's a very, I love reverb builds in general. And Desmodus is a really unique reverb in the way you can build things and really wash them out. It's really quite inspiring. And then, so actually, like a little backstory on me with the first noise engineering thing I ever had was the original Bacillus Ateritas. And the thing I always learned about this was like, yes, it's, primarily focuses, I guess, drums and percussion, but it's really great on bass. And because you can really do all these kind of like warpy, twisting bass movements, the BI is something that I've always been able to really, really appreciate when it came to making a bass sound. So for instance, if I went over just this little section I made, and what you'll see is there's all this modulation. And let me delete the modulation for a second. So here's without any, and this is just a little pattern, right? Now, if I bring back the modulation, oh, whoops, I'm sorry, wrong one. Let's try that again. This is the pattern. And let me loop this, whoops, come here. Great. Now, if I bring back the modulation, that one little, basically it's a wave folded sine wave. With it, it becomes all warpy. And if we open up the BI, now you're going to see how this thing's actually getting modulated. And it's very expressive. That's what I've always liked about this stuff is it's unique, it's expressive, and you can basically turn, like this could be a drum and I turned it into a bass really with just some automation movements. So that's one of my favorite ways to use the BI. And that also goes through a Desmodus, because what later happens in this build section right here, just the reverb swell trick. I've basically made this entire thing, like all the drums for the most part are BI, but also the bass. So I layered that with a sub bass, and this is a really simple BI patch. This is just a sine wave. And I use the skin mode, which doesn't have a pitch attack. Whereas, for instance, my kick, which is basically a very similar patch, this is the kick. And if you compare the two, the only real difference is, I mean, really, it's just the fact that this has an attack and it's in liquid mode, which is going to give you a pitch envelope. But everything else is relatively similar. I found that just in general, I like moving up harmonic when it comes to the kick. Sometimes it just changes the tonality of the kick a little bit. But it's very similar, but the kick sounds like this, as opposed to. So it's a nice thing too, because then when you create a kick and a sub bass out of basically a similar source, they're going to live together really well. So they also lock in kind of perfectly. So they never sound out of place. They always sound together. I made my snare also out of the BI. It's just this. And I still use, actually, like to this day, my original BI, I use that for snare drums all the time because it just sounds, kind of does the 808 thing, but you can kind of tweak it a bit. And that's what I like about it, because this, I mean, again, it's super simple. There's a lot you can do with it. I like the wave folding because I love distortion in general. So for instance, this would be without any. That's with a ton. And I liked it in there. I kept the morph all the way to the left because that's a sine wave, just because I wanted to have kind of a clear tone. But you can obviously twist it as it'll go from sine to triangle to saw, etc. But for my purposes, I like the sine wave. I like sines in general. And then even the hi-hat, that's made out of the BI also. It sounds like that. And this time I'm using the metal mode in the BI, and I wanted to kill the tonality of it. So basically because I didn't want it to have an actual tone, I just wanted it to be basically a metal. So the wave folding's all the way up. Morph is, you know, pretty aggressive. It's almost a square wave, but not quite. And the spread is all the way up as well. So without any of that stuff, sounds like that. And the fold really blasts it. The morph changes it more. And spread does this. It's subtle, but you basically kind of change the sound of the attack, which is something that's very, very handy. And then I just put it through some EQs and a harmonizer as well. And then lastly, with the pads, again, I'm using the CV for all this stuff, and it's very similar to the other. Actually, not lastly, because there's one other important function, but this pad is basically doing something similar as the first one. Wait. Great sound, and it just hangs there forever because of this modus is really, that regeneration, it really, you can create this, you know, these ethereal, like forever lasting drones. It's really handy. Let's get rid of it though. Now this is kind of a fun, playful bit, and this is really the last important thing to talk about. Whoop. See, the regeneration just comes back even when I wasn't there. But let's talk about this little melody. And it's this little chromatic melody made with the CV. And just manually, I created my own LFO, basically, just in Pro Tools Automation. And it's just moving center. So you can see the way the waveform moves right here. Kind of like a phaser, but then there's a delay. And the delay is actually, once again, Desmodus. But I'm just gonna copy that so I can come back to it. But so the thing about this Desmodus in general, I mean, it's a reverb based on delays. So if you take the density pretty much all the way down, you get a delay. There's your reverb. And then the timing itself, I just did this by ear. So I wanted to showcase that, this is something that you can actually, morph a delay into a reverb. So in this little breakdown section, if you want to call it that, these parameters all get automated. And let's just go from here and you'll see how this delay turns into a reverb. And it's very effective if you're creating, this kind of like techno-y transition build. So it's a really handy trick. And I love being able to morph sounds together. And in general, really, I mean, one of the biggest strengths that anything noise engineering makes, but especially being able to have this in plugin form where you can go crazy with automation, is that the morphing is seamless and it's creative. And it's they're just really fun tools. They're inspiring, they sound good. And having them now in plugin form as opposed to having to turn on the machine and deal with, all the cables. This is something that now makes it really accessible and really easy to tap into that sound without the often headache of going through the machine. So that's how I like these things. And I'm happy to answer any questions on how I use them.
Awesome, Matt. Thank you so much. That was absolutely incredible. And I can see some of the stuff coming in through some of the channels here. So thank you for that. So first question, and then we'll actually go ahead and invite Chris and Marcus back as well. First question that has come in is, so there are actually a few questions that have been coming in based around your usage of the plugins, Matt. And so one of the questions we've got has to do with, as a person who is using both the plugins and the hardware, how do you decide? Obviously, outside of polyphony, how do you decide, which to use, considering that you've got both?
It depends what I'm doing, I suppose, in the moment. Before, if I needed a noise engineering kind of sound, I was beholden to the modular, so I had to do that. Now, for instance, I don't want to have to turn that on every time I'm just writing or something like that. Sometimes if I need to work on something quickly, or, like Chris was talking about composers and when you have a really fast turnaround, a lot of times it's not really an option to be able to go the modular route. So having, and there's even on a project I've been working on recently, I've been using the BI just because it's, really quick to get that kind of thing. I can just turn it on. And also tuning is, if I want to do tuned kick drums or something like that, don't get me wrong, I can do it in the modular, but it's a bit of a pain. Here, I literally can just do it in the piano roll and everything is just perfectly in tune. So for convenience sake, obviously, there's always going to be magic in hardware that doesn't exist in software. That's the nature of the beast. But this, in a bizarre way, the plugin, copycats of the hardware are a lot more versatile. So they both are used. But it just depends also, how much time I have, where my headspace is. Do I want to go through the whole modular experience, or do that noise engineering sound?
One of the things that I've often heard from the people that we had early on in our beta test was that they were really excited that everybody that we have in the beta test are people that knew our products very well already. So most of them came back and said that using the plugins gave them a lot of ideas of ways to use the hardware as well. So for a lot of the people that own both, it's a lot of back and forth and just kind of inspiring new ideas and new concepts with the hardware.
Excellent. So again, Matt, thank you for that. Hang out. We've got some questions coming through. And while I kind of get to the questions, just really quick, again, just they're the 3 plugins. I've got them on a slide here. So one of the questions someone had asked, I believe it was on YouTube, if there are demos available of the plugins, and there aren't. But then there was a follow-up question right after that is, what do they cost? So great news. They're actually they're very inexpensive. I think that the value for these plugins is incredibly high. The plugins are actually $49 a piece, and I'm giving you the U.S. prices. Now, we're not trying to be salesy here on the webinar, but the question was asked. So they're $49 a piece, and then actually Noise Engineering have all 3 plugins available in what they call the Noise Engineering Pack 1, and they're available at a discounted rate for $119 US. Now, the plugins are available. Again, they're currently AAX only right now. Again, AU and VST will be made available over the next couple of months. So Pro Tools users get it first. And they're available exclusively at the Avid marketplace at our shop there. So I'll go into our Q&A slide here. So of course, if you want to go back and check out any of the other previous audio community plugins, there's the link for that. But if you want to find out any further information on these plugins, you can actually visit the Noise Engineering page, the noiseengineering.us/Avid, and all the information that you'd want to find is there. There's some really great sound examples, as well as some quotes from some other users like Martin Gore. A bunch of folks. Daniel Miller. So many wonderful people are fans of Noise Engineering. So make sure you check that out. So we've got some great questions coming through. So Alberto Hernandez Seradia is asking, are parameters MIDI learnable to a MIDI controller?
You take that one. So on each plugin, there is a MIDI page, and basically you can just choose a MIDI CC for every parameter on that and map that to your controller however you want to. And the interesting thing about it is you can map as many parameters to a single CC as you want to, so you can create sort of macro controls too.
Awesome. Thank you, Marcus. So we've got a kind of a statement, and I think this would be a good one to talk about. So Scott Frankfurt and from Facebook, thank you. That this is convenient. As plugins, you now compete with every AAX synth out there. It's really important in my mind that you emphasize the uniqueness of the sound. Can you address? Well, I think we addressed some of that at the top when we were talking about the sound of Noise Engineering. But I don't know if any of you want to talk about the uniqueness. I'll start by saying obviously you can tell by just from the GUI and the user interface. There's certainly a uniqueness there, but everything has purpose. Specifically, as Chris mentioned earlier, and I think Matt kind of went into that as well, because these are built from Eurorack modules from modular synthesis. There's already a unique kind of way that sound design is approached there, and you can hear it. Certainly in Matt's demo, if you go and listen to some of the sound demos on the Noise Engineering site, you can hear that. But certainly that's why I use Noise Engineering stuff in the first place, is just because of the uniqueness of it. A lot of the stuff that I craft, whether it's in the plugin or in hardware, I'm not really going to be able to achieve in that same way, because there's a lot of extra special stuff that goes into the design of what they're doing. But I don't know if Chris, Marcus, or even Matt, if you wanted to address that.
I think we all have something to say about that, but I'll let Matt and Marcus go first, and I'll back clean up, I guess.
For me, it's unique sounding. Simple as that. Yes, there's tons of plugins obviously available anywhere. I don't know any plugin that's as ludicrous as the Desmodus as far as reverb goes. that's a very unique sounding. I mean, I like it mostly, actually, I like it as an ambience maker. That's my personal use for it. But obviously, I mean, as I was showing, you can do so much with it. I mean, it's a very simple, I mean, the GUI is simpler than Valhalla. You know, it's really, really simple. So that's my biggest thing. I did notice there's a question also that just about the Desmodus. Is there and correct me if I'm wrong, but is there they want to know if there's a equivalent for the FSU button? That's just the randomization button, unless I'm mistaken, right?
No. So FSU on hardware. FSU on hardware basically maxes the regen and mutes the input. So you get this kind of abstract, evolving, kind of aggressive tail out of the reverb, just as long as you're holding that button down. And you can emulate that pretty easily in the software just by cranking regen and muting whatever's going into it. They also asked, how do you tame that effect on the hardware? You kind of don't. That's kind of the point of the FSU button. If you want it to be kind of nice, I often run it through a limiter in my dynamics chain so that it's, you know, relatively close to the same volume as the other stuff. But, you know, it's kind of there to be in your face.
And that's sort of the definition of reverb. If you crank up the reverb, you're going to get gain.
Yeah, yeah, it's a feedback loop. It does that.
Yeah. Marcus, did you have anything to add about the uniqueness of the noise engineering sound?
Yes, I do. So the one of the things that Matt demonstrated really well in his demo session was how quickly you can kind of turn one sound into another sound. So like going from kick drum to a completely different bass type sound with just a few parameter changes is really interesting. I like to write a lot of monophonic stuff in my sessions, and being able to have a single voice that can do a whole lot of different things with just a little bit of automation is really important. And that can be difficult in more complex plugins, but I think we've done pretty well making that really straightforward with these voices.
Awesome. So I did want to also mention, you know, as far as the uniqueness, these plugins also they auto map to Yukon controllers. So, you know, as a Pro Tools user, being able to control the instruments, not just, you know, in Desmodus as well, which I consider to be an instrument in its own right. Those are controllable via Yukon. So, some great questions coming in. Alberto had a follow-up question. Is there any way to use Desmodus as a delay effect instead of a reverb? Which is, there's such a great answer to this, which is basically kind of yes, right? Sort of. I mean, I don't know who wants to tackle that one. I know, Matt, you kind of showed it.
Yeah, I did show it. Yeah, just turn density down to 0. So therefore, you know, the density is basically one tap. And then there's your delay. And then regen becomes your feedback. Simple.
Awesome.
And we do have delays coming.
Yeah, so actually, you know, now's you know, since for those of you here, you know, be good for you to know that Noise Engineering have some other plugins planned to be released, you know, throughout the course of the year. Is that right, Chris?
We have something like 20 plugins in the works. They won't be out all this year, but we have quite a long roadmap of plugins that we anticipate releasing over the course of time.
Excellent.
Like I said, we've been working on these for a while.
Yeah, that you have. Yeah, this is a labor of love for sure. So we've just got a few more minutes. There's some great questions coming in, so I'll try and get to as many as I can. Question that came in from LinkedIn: are there side chains? And I'm guessing they're asking on a specific plugin or any of them in general.
So there's not sidechain inputs for any of these that would really make sense for most of what we're doing. But the Desmodus, like I mentioned earlier, if you crank the regen, it actually ducks the reverb tail based on the input. So you can create kind of sidechain ducking effects. That's probably the closest thing to anything remotely like a sidechain that exists in these plugins.
Okay, awesome. So let's see. Someone's asking. The plugins look awesome. So yeah, again, again, very unique GUI, but I think we all love them and love how they look, and certainly as you start interacting with them, they feel great. So, but the question was, are they CPU heavy?
I can take that one. So it's hard to actually define heavy, but we tried to make them as lightweight as possible. One of our early beta testers did she has a session that she loads in, I think it's over 100 instances of the plugins, and on a somewhat older computer, and passed with flying colors. So I would not consider them CPU heavy.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, as one of your testers, I do spend a lot of time instantiating as many of the plugins as I possibly can. From one, then going all the way down, mixing and matching, and I have to say, it's on my system, it's been really pretty light on CPU, and that's something that, obviously, Pro Tools being what it is, that's something that's pretty important. So that's one thing, I have to say these plugins are great on that. We've got a question here, and Chris, you just kind of mentioned, there's a plan for more plugins throughout the year, but Alberto followed up again with another question: if you have any distortion unit planned. Now, I'll let you guys take that one.
We hope so. We'll put it there.
Enough said. Alberto, you're going to have to watch the space, and let's see what happens. So let's see. You've got a couple minutes left. Andrew Worst, asked, could we get a quick rundown on saving user presets and what categorization looks like in those menus? I don't know. Should we pull up? I don't know. We pull up Matt's screen again, or Marcus? How do you want to?
I can just explain real quick. It's pretty straightforward. So basically, there's a preset page. And to save a user preset, you basically just hit, there's a Save As button that opens up the file system, and you have the dedicated preset directory for that plugin with a bunch of folders that you can organize your presets into. Once you've saved a preset there are navigation buttons within the plugin so that you can jump between directories and between presets without opening the file system again.
And in addition to that, because they're AAX plugins in the AAX shell, you have the ability to save a preset within the session using the AAX shell and menu right in the top. So you can always save it, or even save it to a separate menu. So you've got options there, which is great. And again, these plugins, Marcus, you mentioned earlier, these plugins have, in some cases, thousands of presets, and hundreds of presets at the bare minimum, which is great. There's so much great stuff to pull from, very inspiring stuff from a lot of different artists and users. So which is really awesome. Thank you. So Tim Holbert has a question here, and we're almost out of time. But all right, Tim, having noise engineering in the box is great. Any ETA on a second pack? Smiley face.
Hi, Tim. Tim is a friend of Noise Engineering, and he's both a hardware and software user. Well, Tim, we're working on it. We don't have a defined date. We don't like to announce dates too far in advance because, as we've learned in the last year or so, things go wrong. So we don't, until we are really confident in a release, we don't like to announce actual dates.
Fair enough. So as we close up here, again, wanted to thank Chris, Marcus, Matt. Thank you so much for being here. Just before we go, one last question, and this is from me asking you guys for some advice for those who are interested in kind of jumping into this side of things. What are quick tip or quick thought on sound design? Jumping into these plugins, they are unique. They're a little bit different. Obviously, again, there's a ton of great presets there. But any tips you would, or anything you would recommend when diving into these plugins when starting to use them outside of having fun, which is, hopefully everyone will. I certainly do. But any quick tips or recommendation you'd make on how to get started when they dive into any of the noise engineering plugs?
My first thing would be remember that these come from the hardware world and they love automation.
Great point. Great
And I'll
point.
kick it to the others.
I would say on the synths, play with the fold parameters. That's a really unique type of parameter to have on a synth like this. It's, again, comes from hardware, and wave folders are relatively common there, but they're kind of hard to find in software, and it's a fun parameter to play with. So try the folder out.
Awesome. Matt,
Yeah,
anything?
and basically, I have a similar statement to both Marcus and Chris. Start with the BI only because it's the simplest one, and you could do it with automation, or if you just want to feel more tactile, just map a few knobs on your MIDI controller to. Particularly, you got to do, like, the most important ones to me are morph and fold, but you go nuts with harmonic and spread and all that, but morph and fold, just you could have a pattern playing, and if you just the same way, say I had a sequence going on the modular, and I would just start tweaking knobs, or start sending LFOs or envelopes to those knobs, that's when you start getting these really complex and expressive sounds that truly do morph together and really are quite exciting. So it's all about the modulation. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much. We are at time. Again, our deepest, biggest thanks to Noise Engineering, Chris, Marcus, Stephen, who's around somewhere, and the pups, wherever they are. Matt, thank you so much also for introducing me to these fine folks and opening up my ears and my whole world to this. And now everybody else gets to check these out. So again, make sure you go check them out, noiseengineering.us/Avid for the plugins. Of course, we'll be back with more. Continue to stay safe wherever in the world you might be. We'll be announcing the next audio community plugin soon. Thank you to all the staff, all the product specialists all around the world monitoring everywhere. Again, Chris, Marcus, Matt, and everyone wherever you might be. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Take care, everyone. Be safe. Bye-bye.